In today's low-code feature focus, we'll talk about using a drop-down with autocomplete using the API Endpoint Methods. This video was a result of a request on our community portal asking for an example of how to do this. So let's dive in. First, let's take a look at the finished product. Then we'll look at the code behind to see how it was built. We have a drop-down with autocomplete, and when you click on it, it opens up with the values from the API. And if you start typing, it will do a search and limit the drop-down to only the items that match. So we click that. That's the impact we're looking for. The drop-down reads the data from an API and fills in the blanks. So let's take a look at that. Today we're demonstrating on a Plantain app implementation, so we'll go to the configuration section and look at APIs. I've built a user lookup API, so we'll open that up and see what it requires. It requires a parameter of username. Let's edit that and see how we get it to work. So the endpoint name is user lookup. We have a single input parameter called username and no other information. On this endpoint, when you provide username as a parameter, we'll return users from the users table that match. I've done this in two actions. The first action is a SQL Select statement, a SQL query. So we're loading entities from SQL, and we're doing a select star from users, where username is like @username. The @username parameter is provided from the token that was input, the username, and I also added a % to the end of it so that a partial username will return the matching entries. I'm returning that to an entity called results, and in the second action, I do an output JSON entity list, and I am simply outputting all of the results. You'll probably want to be a little bit more targeted with this, but let's see how it works. If we go to save and test and put in a name like Bill and execute, we can see that we get a response that has the user ID of Bill Jackson and a username, and a user ID of 3. So that's it for our API. It returns all the users that match the username that's provided. We'll go to the sample code page and grab this URL because we're going to need it in the next step. The next step is to create a form, and I've done that here on a page called User Lookup. Before we start the design of our form, we'll use what we just copied and test it out in a browser. So we'll type username equal Bill, and we get all of the users that match. So now that we've tested that the endpoint works as desired, we'll flip back over to our form and edit it. I put the form into edit mode so that I can manage this form. So let's see what the parameters are necessary to set up the dropdown with autocomplete. I added the dropdown with autocomplete. I chose the API Endpoint Methods as a data source, and the dialog opens. We need to know where the API Endpoint module is, and that's a dropdown, so I selected it from here. And I selected my user lookup API get method that I've just defined. I set it that it is a get, and then here's two important properties. One is the text property and one is the value property. In these, they should match exactly to the content that's in your API return JSON. So matching case, username and user ID. So the text property, that which will be displayed in the dropdown, is username. The value property, which is the user ID, is what's going to be stored in this control. We don't need anything else, no path, no property, and that's it. When we come over here and execute it, we type the name, and it pops up. And then behind the scenes, the value that's going to be associated with that is the user ID. And that's it. We've configured a dropdown with autocomplete using a simple API endpoint method. We hope you'll subscribe to our low-code feature focus YouTube channel. and we look forward to seeing comments. Let us know if this was useful for you and what things you'd like us to record in the future.